Welcome once more to those of you who came in during the meditation. Today is it's the 13th, but we're one day late, you could say, in remembrance of 70 years ago that Swami Ananda Jaya, Donald Walters at that time, as he was known, made his first meeting with Paramahansa Yogananda. And the first words that he expressed to Yogananda at that meeting was, "I want to be your disciple." And in remembrance of that occasion, every year we have a special ceremony for that. But last night, which should have been the night, of course, a large group of us, we attended what we thought was going to be the last showing of The Answer, the movie of Swami. And so a large group of us went in remembrance of that. But as it turned out, they extended the stay of the movie once again. So here we are one day later, joining this with our normal Gita satsang. So I'd like to begin in conjunction, sharing from the Gita. What here Krishna is saying here, this is the 13th chapter, he's saying the different paths, the different ways that people come to the truth. And he says to hold the self in the self, by the self. Some seekers follow the path of meditation, some that of knowledge, and some the path of selfless activity. Then he goes on to say, some men, ignorant of these three paths, heed the instructions of their guru, accepting what he teaches as their supreme refuge. They approach the truth worshipfully, and thus cross over the river of death. Now, I mentioned that we went to see the movie last night, The Answer, and I suspect most of you, if not all of you, have seen that movie as well. And I've seen it many times. Now, I've seen it quite a few times. Some of you probably have seen it many times. But one of the things I've found that as I've viewed that movie over and over again is it's like reading a book or seeing a movie. Each time you see it, some little part of it comes out and you focus on that and you get a deeper insight. And I've noticed that as I've watched that movie evolve, and I think I saw early cuts of that maybe a couple of years ago even, that my perception of the movie slowly has changed a little bit as we've gone along. And when I first saw that movie and I watched it, I saw it as a story about Swami Kriyananda, Donald Walters, a young man, and I saw it about him, you might say biographical, seeing him and his life. It was a movie about Swami's life. And of course, Master too. Master plays a large role in that. And so it was about their life at a certain time in their life, at a certain time in history. But as I began to watch it, and I noticed that last night when we went and saw the movie, it dawned on me that now I saw it a little bit different. I wasn't seeing it in terms of Swami's life. It was something else entirely. It was that, yes, he was the main character in that life. He was there, but it wasn't about him personally so much, at least as I was viewing it. It was about a principle. It was about a principle that was being expressed. That was you might say, the theme of the movie was the principle. The characters happened to be Swami and Master. And that principle was the principle of discipleship. That's, in a sense, of what the movie was about. And it was being illustrated by this example. And a very interesting example, and an example dear to my heart, to all of our hearts. But it was that larger principle that began to stick with me, that the relationship between the disciple and the guru. And you remember, and it dawned on me that I think this is actually the intent of the movie as well. Remember, in the movie, there's a certain point when Swamiji buys the autobiography. He goes home and he's on his bed and he's reading. And it shows on the screen the words, and it begins off, the characteristic features of Indian culture have been the search for ultimate verities and the concomitant disciple-guru relationship. And that goes down the screen. And that was exactly what that movie was about. These two principles, the search for ultimate verities, representative of Indian culture, search for verities, and a disciple-guru relationship. And yes, the whole first part of the movie is about Swami's search for truth. And expresses that. He wanted to know truth. But he was looking in the world in this way, that way. And he lived a childhood that was somewhat isolated because he was a foreigner in a foreign land. So and he was not, his relationship with the other children there was fraught with tension. And I'm sure a young boy, having to go to school in a foreign country, sent off to Switzerland or France and he was probably an outsider, but he was searching for something, and he was trying to find it as a young boy. And then, of course, the young boy grows up, and he's searching for it in school. He's searching for it in all the things that one does as a young man, and he was searching for it in a career. He wanted to go in the theater, into the arts. And he's often said he's probably in every possible way, at least mentally, he's tried to search for that. He tried to search for that truth, and it illustrates that. And then it comes to the meeting of Master. And the second half of the movie is that second salient characteristic of Indian tradition, the disciple-guru relationship. And so the movie, in a sense, was a representation of that very first paragraph of the autobiography of a yogi. And I'm sure that wasn't by accident. But it perhaps caught you immediately, but it took me a few viewings before that began to seep in. And it wasn't so much about Swami. And so this, in a personal sense, yes, it was about him, but more of an impersonal sense. And so on September 12th, we celebrate or honor, maybe is a better word. We recognize and honor the principle of discipleship. Just as in the summertime or in the monsoon season, we celebrate and honor Guru Purnima. We honor the Guru. So in a sense, here in September, we recognize the role of the disciple. This one goes with the other. You see, it's a dual nature of guru, disciple, and guru. So we honor that in principle, and we remember, and we think we should, I hope we do, what does it mean to be a disciple? Now, Swami, of course, was initiated, and we see in that movie, or not initiated, but he was blessed by Master. Master blesses him at that meeting and says now he's one of the spiritual family. And so you could say, yes, he became a disciple at that point. And yes, outwardly that's true. But is that the point at which he became a disciple? Well, I don't know. Now, I'm going to share a story that I tried to find it exactly so I get the words right, but I couldn't. So if anybody knows which book this comes from, tell me. So I'll look back and get the wording right. But it's the story of when Swami was a disciple with Master. One of the disciples, a young man, had been a disciple in the monastery there, and he left. And he was talking to Master about it. And that, he had, how could somebody who had come, been part of a disciple, and he had left, and Master just made a comment, well, he had never been in a disciple, really. And I can't remember the exact wording of how he said that, But the idea was, now I thought about that. Obviously, that disciple had probably come to Master, and Master probably, because he said he wasn't accepting many disciples at that time in his life, and so Master had accepted him probably outwardly as a disciple. But then he wasn't, but then Master said he really wasn't. Now, what does that mean? Well, I think just outwardly being accepted as a disciple doesn't make it as a disciple. If we're not inwardly a disciple, if we're not inwardly committing ourselves to what that means, if there's not some inward transformation. And so what you see in Swami's life, his first part of his life, he's living a normal or a regular life, and then he meets Master and there's a transformation. It's like he's and the Christians talk about being born again. And in a sense, he was born again. He did. He was reborn in it was like a new life that he had taken. There was a parting of the ways, and he had now taken on a total new way of being. He had taken on the life of a disciple. And what that meant was he now saw life through a different lens. It was not the same. And I think when we become, and if we think of ourselves as disciples, to see life, we don't see life the same way as opposed to not being a disciple. It's just not something that we take a title. That's, you could say, a disciple in name, but a real disciple is transformed and sees life in a different way. Sees life in a spiritual sense, through the lens of discipleship. How the difference now, instead of seeing life in terms of the normal person, and Swami, of course, iterates this in the movie as well, me, mine, I. This is how people look at life, the normal, and he's commenting on that. In that one scene, and he says, it's appalling. But of course, that was him just a few days before he makes that comment. But all of a sudden now, he saw that, no, you see it in terms of not my ego, what's pleasing to me in my ego, but you see life in terms of ego transcendence, of what can I overcome, what can I give of my ego, and all of a sudden you begin to make that shift. And so for each of us too, we have to ask the question for ourselves: what does it mean to us individually to be a disciple? What does it mean to us? What's the difference? And if there's no difference, we really say we're a disciple? If we don't see life through that prism or through that lens. And I think, and for each of us, perhaps we have to define what that lens is, what it means to us. But it's not something just in name alone. You might be part of the spiritual family, but are you really a disciple? One who's willing to give up, which I think is the hallmark of discipleship, one of willing to give up one's sense of I, me, and mine, and live for something higher. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't have that ego, because, it's not so, it would be so easy if we could just put it aside and just park it there. It's not quite that easy. But yet, our intention is there, and we have, so consequently, we have to use that. We say, okay, I have this, I have these qualities, I have these limitations, but I'm going to use them for a higher purpose instead of using it for my own self-purposes, my self-aggrandizement, my self-exaltation. I'm going to lay it at the feet of the Guru and let him use me. Let him use my ego in order to be able to ultimately transcend that. And so we see this evolution of this soul taking place in the movie. And he starts out as a young man, normal, and he becomes a disciple of having given his life to God through his guru. And this is what we honor and we remember when we come together today on August or September 12th every year to remember discipleship. But think of it in our own self. Now, discipleship is not something, I mean, this is extremely important, as we often say, and we've said at these satsangs before, and we say at discipleship, sometimes ceremonies. That old saying that Swami used to always say, he said, he was repeating a saying. He said, in India there are many gurus, very few disciples. Because being the disciple, now, not literally, I mean, he's having fun with that statement, but it's hard being a disciple. It's hard, but that's what we want. That's our challenge. That's the path we're on right now, of laying ourselves at the feet of something higher and being able to surrender that. And I think to be able to remember discipleship, I think Swamiji is a very good example of that, because I admired him so much. I admire him so much. I say in the past tense, but it shouldn't be, because Swami was, I had the good fortune, very good fortune, to meet Swami at an early time in my life. And I was 22 when I met him, and it was 1968, not 67, and it was 1968. So actually, this is what? 50 years. 50 years. Oh my God. Wow. I hadn't thought of that, but you're right, 50 years. And actually, it would have been in October. Next month, actually. I don't remember the exact day. Maybe I could get a calendar and go back and figure it out. But so that was a good blessing for me. And but I had no idea what was going on. I mean, you're 22. You're just going day to day, and but looking back, I realized there's a great blessing in. And people admire Swami's life, and obviously I do too. But I think Swami was a great man. Because I don't want to personalize this too much to Swami, because there's more. I wanted something larger, but I can't help it. Swami I thought he was a great man, not because he was perfect. He was not perfect. He was working his way to perfection, you see. He was trying. And it was not because things were easy for him and he was just, things flowed through life, because they weren't easy for him. He struggled. But what I admired about him is I could relate to him, because I was struggling. And I had all these things to overcome. But he had taken it many octaves beyond where I was, but yet he had gone through struggle and trial and difficulties, and had got up again and again and again. And I saw that, and I said, that's what it was his struggle and his willingness to continue in the struggle and to keep going. There was that story that one of his brother disciples had told, his brother disciple had a superconscious dream. And in this dream, he saw everybody's running a race. And they were running and running and running. He says, everybody running the race fell. And they would get up again, and they'd fall again. And everybody fell. And he says, now, the difference was some people would get up right away and start running again. Other people, they'd sort of, and maybe they never got up. I don't know. Sooner or later, they'd had to get up, but it took them a long time. Well, and Swami was one of those. He says, and Swami asked, well, did I fall too? He said, oh yes, everybody fell, but everybody got in. You got up. You got up right away. And I thought and I remember him telling that story, and I found that encouraging, because all of us were making our way, and the disciple is one who's willing to get up quick and to just keep right on going. And so Swami had that quality to him. Now, he also had another quality that I found very admirable. Swami was a man of action. And I always felt if he put his mind to anything, he could accomplish it. But of course, he had his focus in life. Although Swami would often joke that wasn't true, that he says, I know nothing about automobiles. And then he says, don't give me tools. And so he would, but nevertheless, if accomplishing something in life, he could do it. But he didn't do it as perhaps other people would do it, because he had taken a certain direction in life to be an instrument for his guru. And you can see in that movie also, there's a few points in there where he vows, I vow to dedicate my life to the fulfillment of this mission. And he had, and Master tells him, he says, you must not fail me. You must not disappoint me. He says, so many have in the past. And Swami would say, well, looking back, they were great devotees. His fellow disciples, that's Master perhaps was criticizing. And he says he wasn't criticizing him personally, but just in that they had disappointed him because they didn't act. He says he saw in Swami the willingness to act. Now, it's easier if you're a disciple and you want to be loyal, you want to be in tune, you want to not cause problems for anybody. The easiest route is to do nothing. No problems. Swami was not like that. He felt it was his duty to be an instrument, to act. Now, the problem with acting, of course, is just what I said. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to stumble. You're going to fall. But he vowed he was going to be an instrument, but not for himself. He was going to be an instrument for his guru. And he was going to carry on as best as he could. And he was going to do his very best and act and take the consequences of maybe doing the wrong thing. But how do you learn? And he says in there in that one point in the movie where Master appears to him, he says, work like lightning, but don't change a word, for editing. He says, how can you possibly do that? You can't work like lightning and not change a word and being an editor. And it was a conundrum. And it would be so easy to, yes, Master passed his teaching down. I'm not going to change a word. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to think. I'm not going to be creative. I'm not going to use my intuition. I'm not going to use my inspiration. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to be safe and be a good disciple. Is that being a good disciple? The unwillingness to step out there and use your God-given talents for the betterment of your guru's work. And then he comes to the point in his life when he says, I understand, Master, you didn't mean not change your word. He says, don't change a thought. He says, not, and then, Master approved of that. It was not change a thought. But he had to but to just be a puppet is not being a disciple. You just, Master said. And 50 years later, Master said, well, what do you make of that? And Swami had the courage to do that. And of course, that's dangerous territory to do that. But he was sincere. And that's what and when I remember the first time I met him, I've often told the story in snippets here and there, and I guess I'm going to do a snippet again because I've used my time up here. But when I first met him, I had met a lot of different spiritual teachers of one sort or another. I lived in an environment where that was easy to do. And I was somewhat searching, but I didn't know what for. But I wasn't attracted to any people I had met before until I met Swami, and he was such an odd person, different. I don't mean odd, and it was odd in that he wasn't like anybody else. That's what I mean. And I immediately liked him. For some reason, obviously there's some karmically, I liked him. I felt attracted to him. But I think in looking back, it was the fact that I felt in him he was sincere. I didn't know if he was right or wrong. I had no ability to judge that. But I did know that he sincerely believed what he was saying, and he was sincerely trying to serve his guru. That was his foremost, you might say, his foremost concern. He wanted to be a good disciple and be representative of the tradition he was passing down. But he was not afraid to take, you might say, the audience's point of view, my point of view, and say, what does this mean? And so he was willing to take Master's words and put them into a language that I could understand. And I appreciated that, because I had been to satsangs where people say, well, and now it wasn't Master because I didn't know about Master, but the equivalent of Master said, but there was no, how did it relate to me? And so Swami was able, he wanted to reach other people with what he had to share. And he was able, he had the talent and the ability to do that. And he had the courage to do that. And of course, he ran into a lot of difficulties because of that as well. But he had that desire to share with other people. And as he said many times, as you watch that movie, that bus is going, on its journey across the United States. He says he was on that bus, and he had two desires. He wanted to know God, wanted to find God. And he wanted, because it was so great, he had been exposed to something that was so beautiful to him, so life-transforming and freeing. He felt the freedom that came from that. He wanted to share it with other people. He says, everybody's got to know about this. He was so on fire for that. And so he had that second desire, to share what he had gained with other people. And I think if we take that message as now in remembrance, is to be a disciple is not to be a disciple as so many do. He said they want God for themselves. They want, it's just natural. I want to be enlightened. I want God for myself. What do I get out of it? And this is why people approach yoga, meditation. They want something for themselves. But how many want it for themselves so that they can give it to somebody else? That's the mark of a great soul, is to not for themselves, but to be able to share it with other people, to be able to present it, to say, this is something that you too will gain the same inspiration and joy and upliftment that I have gained. And that was the mark of Swami. And I think in the sense of a true disciple is somebody who represents and carries on the mission of the Guru. That's what we want to do too. We don't want to receive it just for ourselves, but we want to do what would Master want us to do. He came to share God's teachings with people in whatever way. Not formally, informally, but to be an instrument for this. And so this is, I'm sure, what he would want us to do, to be a true disciple in spirit, not in name, but in spirit. Transform ourselves, be able to let ourselves be instruments to be able to pass this tradition on generation after generation after generation. And this is what Babaji had predicted, that these teachings, and Master had predicted, would one day spread to all lands. And I think we've seen that part, but now not only spread to those lands, but also infuse and bring about the change in society, the change in consciousness that the masters had predicted to happen in the age to come. And so we're all part of that process. And so remember ourselves, we're disciples of a great tradition, and that if we act in that way, carry that consciousness with us, we'll find ourselves infused with the power of the Guru that's behind these great teachings. So many blessings to all of you.